Leo season's here, and if you've been craving the courage to show up and be truly seen, I made something for you. Safe to Be Seen is my new seasonal workbook filled with soul-centered prompts, mirror work, and grounding rituals to help you embody your light without fear. This isn't about performance, it's about presence, and you're ready. Download it now at my website, empoweredwithmelisahepner.org, or you can go to my link tree on my Instagram, and there's a link directly there. Emotionally unavailable. Okay, so I had you back because I really want to talk about internal family systems. I had a guy on a couple weeks ago, and that's one of the things he coaches on. But I feel like I just want to talk more because we touched on it, and he made the comparison between the Inside Out movies, and I was like, oh, you're so right about that. I had never really put that together, and I was like, oh man, that just like opens a world of creativity for me. But I really wanted to get into the parts because, well, I've been so open about the archetypes that I worked with to discover my shame and to really be able to pinpoint what the shame points were and the narratives around that. And I feel like bringing IFS now, like to marry those two things, I like very specific things like this where it's like, here's a part, here's its function. It just makes so much sense to me. And I feel like it's the type of information that like we've been missing for so long, like the reason that people weren't able to access this level of peace or healing before. So I'm not gonna lie, like I know the names, I don't really know shit. So I pulled it up this morning. um but okay, is there just like 4 self managers, firefighters, exiles, or is there more?
Self is not a part. Self is like our true essence. And the other three are more like categories. So it's not like we have the self and then these three parts. There are these three types of parts, but we could have any number of parts within that.
Right. Okay, because let's clarify. Really, parts are, why am I embarrassed to be wrong about this if I'm wrong? My God. Parts are every former version of us, right?
So the founder of IFS, Richard Schwartz, he says that we're born with parts.
Oh, we're
Like
born
it's a
with.
yeah. So that's how he presents this paradigm, and that's what it is. It's a paradigm shift. From the narrative, which I believe fueled what you were discussing earlier, that difficulty we had as a society and moving towards more healing and change. We had this narrative that we have like a mono mind. So if you are, drinking all the time, something's wrong with you. You are bad, or you have no self control, or blah, blah, blah. Whereas IFS is rooted in a paradigm shift that says we all have a multi mind. So, not just, people with dissociative identity disorder, where there are these extreme splits in personality and consciousness and behavior, but that we all have, yes, different versions of ourselves, but he says it's something that we're born with. And based on our traumas, when we're not able to heal from the trauma, that part, holds on to that pain and believes it has to do a particular role to protect us from that pain. It kind of depends on the category, though. So, like our exiles are holding on to the pain that we were told not to cry about as children. We were told to get over it. Nobody wants to hear about it. Not even just as children, but even as adults. So the exiles are locked away, pushed away because we don't want to deal with the pain. Our managers try to control or please to keep the exiles at bay, to keep us focused on what's happening around us, to protect us, really from the pain of the exiles. And then our firefighters, they go to extremes. They don't care, what the long-term impact is to our bodies or our relationships or our long-term happiness. There, if the pain of the exiles starts to arise, they do whatever it takes to shut it down. So this is like addictions or angry outbursts, self-sabotage, different things like this.
Yeah. Okay. So then I'm just going to recap to make sure I'm understanding. I love, first of all, that you're explaining it as a paradigm shift because that's really what we're here for, right? Is just to expand our consciousness and understand what we're fucking doing and why we're doing it. But, okay, so you're saying then that we're born with these parts, they are just a function of us, that we all have coping mechanisms, whether they are good or bad, and we're just born with them. So an exile is the part of us that does hold on to all of those traumas and feelings and whatever. And then the other categories really are just to help us avoid the exile part of ourselves. Is that correct?
Well, so the firefighters and managers are protectors. The only one thing I would clarify is that I don't think necessarily that we're born with our particular coping strategies necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I think, more like our the parts that we are born with. It's just like in our character, in our nature, that we have different versions of ourselves. But again, depending on what we go through, different of our parts will feel like I am just stuck in this pain, and so they're in exile, or I cannot stand that pain, so I'm going to become a manager or a firefighter. And it just kind of evolves out from there. But what Dr. Richard Schwartz says is that, these malfunctioning roles of our parts isn't even the essence of what they are. They don't want to do these things. They
Right.
just are so afraid and don't have the perspective of self that they're stuck doing these things. And when we help them and we unburden them and we teach them that there's another way, that they can still reach their goals of, which is for us to be okay, for us really not to not die, we can still reach those goals, and they can let go of this role, this particular job that they do, and they can be free to do something else. And they're actually quite excited by that. And it might sound
Yeah.
weird to hear that. And it is so interesting, as a therapist who uses IFS with my clients and, on my own. It's very cool and interesting how you can just open yourself up and ask these questions and the answer just comes. In my past, even as a therapist, I was very averse to things that weren't concrete. I was very into CBT, even somatic therapy. I was like, I don't know about that. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
but then I learned about IFS because I learned how effective it was in treating trauma. And I
Mm-hmm.
saw how my CBT was not, scratching the surface when it came to trauma. And so, I learned about it and I saw how it was effective, and I was very interested, and I got trained, and I started using it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this works. There are parts inside of us that come up and give us these answers when we explore it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting too. And I mean, I think I definitely understand your hesitance to have leaned into any of these teachings, because I know for me at first, for any of this stuff, I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep an open mind, but that doesn't make sense. But you know why? Because I hadn't yet overcome the inability to stop intellectualizing. And I think honestly, that's the danger in CBT, is that we are handing a gun over to somebody who already knows how to think over and
Mhm.
over and over, and to intellectualize their experience, which thereby minimalizes it, I think, inherently. When you are just thinking about something and not experiencing the feeling of something, you're stuck. And I think CBT really kind of helped to create that stuckness for a really long time, if we're not doing other things to go deeper. And I think that then people thought deeper meant let's dig it all up. Like, I'm not a therapist who says, like, let's start at the beginning. I'm like, let's start now. I can pretty much answer
Mhm.
my own questions about their history based off what they tell me in the now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, oh, okay. So were your parents this or this? Okay, thought so. Okay, was it this, or like, are you the oldest child or the baby? You know, like, there's a few things that you can ask to get a really good understanding of the past traumas. You don't have to do that all in one day, is my point. Like, we can take it slow and give them coping skills right now, in the here, in the now, to take forward till the next session even. And why I'm making such a big deal about that and emphasizing it is because that's how things happen for me, just from having somebody on my podcast. She gave me life altering information that then helped me get, okay, now I'm going to order this book, now I'm going to do this book with my friend, like, now I'm going to have her back on and help me understand some of the stuff I've learned. Life altering. But like, I didn't have to tell her my whole life story for her to hear my shame when I spoke, and that was really important to me. But i think I think that we as a society are still really struggling with experiencing emotions, and this can really help with that. That's what I really love about it. And I don't know, I just think it's really exciting for all this new information to be here to help us, to help ourselves, to help other people. And I think for all of us, but particularly therapists, like, you have to continue your own internal work, or else how do you see? Because I know these issues intimately. That's why it's easy for me to pick up on someone else's fear or shame. I can hear it within a couple of sentences of exactly what's happening, because I'm so intimately acquainted with my own stuff. So the reason I love that one of the parts is firefighter is I just think about all the different ways I've done that to myself. Like, the first time I heard about this, I was like, oh my God. Because, like, I even had to, one of the ways that my firefighter would show up was, when I would reach like a chemical low, like, the dopamine stores have run out. I've reached the very end of the TikTok algorithm, is usually when something like this would happen, because I didn't really know how to spend time by myself. But yet I spent a lot of time by myself. So I learned to, like, get into books and get, you know, internet, whatever. And TikTok, I'm so addicted to. Like, I really got to work on that. But, you know, even that runs out. And so I would be laying there, and like, everyone in my family's busy. 5 minutes before, that was fine. But now that I'm at a chemical low, like, I have literally no dopamine happening, I'm just kind of at baseline, honestly, maybe a dip under, but I'm bored. Because I didn't have anyone immediately to fill that need, it would automatically shift to loneliness. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm lonely. And I confuse the two a lot. And then before I could even do much with that, I would jump straight to, well, I'm lonely because nobody wants to spend time with me, because, like, I'm unlovable or whatever. But that was a very fleeting thought, and I'd go straight into anger. Like, straight into, like, well, blah blah blah, they should this, and you know what, and that's the way I spent most of my life, was just up here spinning, you know.
Something you know is more and more of a challenge in our society with our smartphones and social media and all of that. It's harder to find or just it takes effort to be bored. You know, you have to just
Mhm.
intentionally like put it down or just really reach a breaking point of like, well, there's nothing left. And what that does, you know, to kind of look at what you shared through IFS, you know, without the stimulation, now it's easier to hear that exile part in the background saying, nobody wants to spend time with me, that wound that the exile is holding on to. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. This is a
Right.
feeling the heart is holding on to. And then as soon as the firefighter sees that pain start to arise, it you know takes over with the anger in this case, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the benefit of learning not just to listen to what's going on internally, but having the tools through IFS to support ourselves. And this is something that is best done in therapy. It can get, you know, even dangerous, honestly, if not scary, to work with our exiles by ourselves because,
Yeah.
again, they've been locked away and pushed away for a long time. And on top of it, we have, you know, all these other parts trying to keep them away, all these protectors. So, working with a therapist to unburden the exile leads to not hearing that kind of message, you know, when you're bored, or
Mm-hmm.
even if you know a feeling of loneliness comes up, we can know, oh, this is my exile. It's not going to come out as intensely like it's taking over and then make the firefighter take over when we've done some unburdening. And we can instead be like, oh, hey, sweetie, you know, I see you. Remember, you can trust me. I've got this. You know, I can meet our needs. I know I'm loved. And when we build the rapport with our parts, which is a big piece of this too, they'll be willing to listen. They will trust you versus if we just try to tell our parts like out of nowhere, like you don't need to be
You're
doing this.
fine.
Everything's
Mm-hmm.
yeah. They're not gonna listen, they're gonna resist and it's not gonna work.
Man, that is a fucking great point, because, you know, in this idea that resistance keeps us stuck, there for a minute, I was kind of unknowingly reverting back to a pattern of like shutdown, to where, because I've learned kind of how to manage the thinkings, which was the center of all my, you know, troubles, was all this shit happening, the noise, you know. um but because of that, I especially during PMS, like, because I know nothing that comes up is true. So I'm like, shh, shh. And then one day it just hit me like, no, you're still treating yourself like crap when you do that. You have to at least give it attention. You have to ask why or what, or, you know, like, I just started
Mhm.
viewing those thoughts as like a babier version of myself that needed tending to, and say, and getting curious. I think curiosity, we talk about that so much, but I think that's the element most people are missing, is they take all these things for the gospel, and they're just not. 98% of what you think is a fucking lie. So you got to back up and get curious.
Yeah, and you know, going back to CBT, I mean, I will say, like for me, like elements of CBT did help me a lot. And there were clients I worked with that, you know, it was really helpful with and for in certain aspects. But, you know, going back to the intellectualization that happens in CBT, you know, like let's say, you know, I'm PMSing and I'm having all these extra, you know, negative thoughts. If I'm using CBT, I'm just going to keep telling myself those things aren't true, pushing them
Right.
away, focusing on it now. Whereas what I believe now, and I'm trying to think if like what Dr. Schwartz says about this, um, you know, I think he would agree. But how I see it now is like even if the brain is giving me these negative, untrue, unhelpful thoughts, it's still, like you said, is, deserves that curiosity, because that's what's going to heal it. If we just ignore and push away, yeah, maybe that's better than taking it as the gospel, but even better is just to know it's not true, and we can automatically like lean into that zone by recognizing it's a part. And it's very easy to recognize our parts when we know what self is and what self has. So self has 8 C's is how he puts it. And there's also 5 P's, which I learned about, later. And I'll go ahead and list them off. I have a list right here actually that I just keep on hand. But so self, if I'm gonna use both the 5 P's and the 8 C's. Self has presence, perspective, persistence, playfulness, patience, is curious, calm, confident, compassionate, courageous, creative, connected, and has clarity. So
Oh, I like
anytime we
those.
have any, yeah, and how self was discovered is because as Dr. Richard Schwartz, who was trained, has a doctorate in, or PhD, same thing, in marriage and family therapy, he was working with bulimia clients, and it's notoriously difficult to cure bulimia. And he was working with families, children and their parents, using this method to heal, and it wasn't working. And so when he was talking to the kids, the teens, whatever they were, about, what's going on? Why does this keep happening? Despite, these breakthroughs we're making in our family therapy sessions, they would talk about how basically it would feel like a part was taking over. Their pain would come up, they would not be in control, and the binge would happen, and or the purge or whatever the case is. And then, there would be times where they would talk about these characteristics, times where they felt curious or calm or confident, passionate, etc. And Dr. Schwartz would say, like, let's encourage that part. Let's let that part, run the show more. And even the kids would say, like, that feels like myself. Like, that doesn't feel like a part. It feels like myself. And what's amazing, and this is like kind of a given with spirituality, is that regardless of the trauma someone had been through or the kind of person they were, this self energy is inside of all of us. So I'm trying to remember how I got on that tangent now.
Well,
Sure.
you were basically just explaining what self is, I think, because you started with the C's and the P's.
Yeah, I was explaining self after we were talking about something along the lines with parts. Oh, I was talking about CBT and right, the using that intellectualization with our negative thoughts. So yeah, if we're aware of what self looks like, sounds like, feels like, it's pretty easy to spot apart. Self is not going to have a negative thought.
Right.
It's not like they're going to be all rainbows and butterflies all the time either. We can be in self and say, this is a challenge, but we have that
Mm-hmm.
perseverance to face it. We have that confidence to be like, somehow figure it out. I'm going to do my best. Da da da. And so it's pretty easy to spot. And so if we have that awareness of, if there's anger, fear, sadness, pain, coming up, automatically there's some level of awareness when we are deep in this work that this is a part. And so there's already that ability to have, again, that awareness that chances are this isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can look at it not as if it's the gospel, but also not push it away like, oh, it's not true. Instead, we can just look at it with that curiosity and compassion and let that part know, everything's okay. They can trust us. So another thing I was getting to with all of this is that, even with something like, PMS, I believe, it's even like an opportunity for our body to let us know, hey, I've still got this pain I'm holding on to, or this wound
Mm-hmm.
hasn't healed yet. And so whether it's something happening internally, medically, hormonally, or even something external going on,
Mm-hmm.
these are opportunities to further heal our system with this awareness.
Yeah. And I think I was really limiting that potential by just being like, oh, we don't talk to ourselves like that. And to me, like, I'm going to really start focusing and drawing the like correlation, even like, I'm parenting a young daughter. And if she were to all of a sudden, thank God she does not have body image issues, but if she were to say something like, ugh, I look fat in this, or something negative, or even nobody likes me, instead of just being like, that's not true, shush,
Mm-hmm.
actually going in and being like, what's what why are you saying that? And meeting that need that way. I would never just dismiss that with her. I mean, I probably would have before, a long time ago, but like I'm saying now, and that I need to be that gentle with myself too, because there are a lot of moving pieces at all times. And and I do think that it's just that compassion piece where you just say,
Mm-hmm.
like, in if I'm able to extend this like grace and understanding for the first time in my entire life, honestly, at this deep of a level, because I offer that to myself first, I have to remember in those vulnerable moments, I have to
Mm-hmm.
extend it to myself first and to continue to really just integrate that. And that's what I've been feeling is a new level of integration with a lot of this is like I really don't want to be dismissive, and I know that's my default. I know that's how I ever got into the situation I was in the first place. And I mean, just to clarify, I don't think CBT is bad. I think for people who have done a lot of the self help books and a lot of therapy that didn't necessarily scratch beneath that surface, and they are very good at intellectualizing their experiences already, that's really CBT. You can't do that with them because they already know. They know that shit. They know what their thoughts are. They know, even a lot of times, they think they know why they do those things. But explaining things at a root level, like where did the thought come from, how did it originate, not just what is the thought, what is the truth, but why do you think that you feel that way at your core. And that's why I think programs like this are really important, because it's another way of experiencing. And as somebody who's, I don't think I have as much trouble experiencing like naturally now. In fact, sometimes it's a little too easy, like eh, seeing stories on the news or even just driving by something that makes me sad. Oh, I can feel it in every core cell of my body now. But um I think we have to learn to make those connections.
Yeah, going back to the compassion piece and like that approach you would take with your daughter, how you want to use those approaches with yourself. I believe IFS really helps with this as well because, yes, with IFS we talk about our parts, but Dr. Schwartz and I to use that word interchangeably with our inner children. So it's not just an inner child, our parents are inner children. And it's our role to parent our parents. That's how,
Mm-hmm.
we feel and thrive more and all of that. And so it's helpful because we can we can sometimes it's hard to be kind to ourselves. If we're not used to it, we're really
Mm-hmm.
conditioned to feel like we're almost critic in many cases. So really trying to break that can feel like such a shift. Whereas if we're speaking to part of ourselves, something young, something afraid, even if it's presenting as like an I know better than you, I need to take care of you, I let me be the boss of you kind of part, deep down, it's a scared little kid as well because of how it's
Mm-hmm.
functioning in the brain, how it originated. And so yeah, this approach can also make it easier to do that because we don't have to just, you know, treat ourselves as the adults we are as children, but treat parts of ourselves or our children in the way we would treat a child, and it works. It works.
Yeah, that's so true. And I can't tell you how good it feels. Like sometimes to just be like, what's going on, little honey? But, conversely, it's also a little bit hard for me to take people too seriously these days when they are kind of shitty because it's so obvious why now. Like, I mean, yes, I'm a human. So initially I'm like, you bitch. But then I'm like, I'm not giving this my energy because you know what? You know what? I already know what that is. Like, I already know what that is. So I'm not going to take that personally. And that's what I think is really important too when you're working either on yourself or with somebody in this capacity is to understand there are two perspectives. One is your feelings are valid. Like you had a response to an experience, word, got you. And there's no reason like about you that anybody else does anything. Their shit's about them, your shit's about you. And if you want to choose to take that experience personally, that's okay. I'm not going to shame you about it, but like why are you taking it personally? What's coming up for you? Because it's all just a why. If you can figure out each little why, it's so much easier. Because I mean, I love to intellectualize things. Like if you believe in astrology, I got air and fire. Like I love to just hey, let me just overthink about something for a hot minute. I can get lost in even happy thoughts. Like I just, it's a good time up in my brain if I want it to be. But um I I do try to stay really, really curious about like, okay, I'm still upset. Why? Why is this the piece I'm latching on to? And so I'm really trying to just bring my little babies inside of me together. And then I also explain to clients like I had someone the other day, their parents said something really shitty to them and I like did the whole like what the fuck, like that was so fucking rude, blah blah blah. And then we got the, okay, now, yeah, can you believe it? Okay. And I want you to picture your parents as 10-year-old children because that's what that was. And if a 10-year-old child was to experience this over and over and then they said this, why would they say that? Right. And that's why your parents said it. That wasn't like our conscious selves aren't stupid. We know better, but our subconscious will do lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of things to bury our conscious. Period. We don't want to feel. We're so afraid because feeling means pain. I mean, I even had this experience with my own child one time where my 18-year-old, I was talking to him about learning how to experience feelings, and he was like, I do, blah, blah, blah. And he was saying something. I'm like, no, you're thinking. That's you in your brain. You have to feel. And he goes, like here? And I go, yeah. And he goes, ooh, I don't like that. And I'm like, wow, just to see it in real life in somebody else, like I know how I am. So like I know I do that too, but to watch somebody else in real time do that and go, ooh, I don't like the way that feels. And the reason all these gurus are saying feel it and release it is because if you're actually feeling and you're not thinking and you're not feeding the emotion with the thoughts, it goes away so fast. But people don't realize that because of how long we've been stuck in our own brains just thinking and thinking.
The parts are running the show, and they don't have perspective like self does. That
Mm-hmm.
just face it. It's going to be digested, and I will feel free. You know, if I don't face this, it's going to get stored in my body. It's going to come up through a fight later with my partner or an illness later down the road. So I'd rather feel it now because either way, we're going to feel it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's not like we can actually escape the pain, but we can just move with it. We can just flow and allow an experience, and then we can just move through it and face so much more what we would prefer. So it's all
Mm-hmm.
about, are there parts running the show? I say like in the driver's seat. There's a part in the driver's seat or self in the driver's seat. You want self in the driver's seat. And so even with what you were sharing about That initial reaction to someone, being shitty, you know, that anger is a part coming up. But, even if it hasn't been consciously directly, we could say, whether it has or hasn't, we could say, that part has seen enough in you to trust that as soon as you had that awareness come up of like, wait, I don't need to do this, it was willing to step aside and yourself was able to come forward and have that perspective and know that like this person would not be acting this way if they weren't holding on to a lot of pain, if they didn't know better and have the tools to regulate and on and on. But yeah, we don't want to feel our pain. And what's so cool too is, even as I'm teaching clients this, because, I teach my clients to learn to notice what's going on in the body, to tune into it, to accept and allow it, but also to breathe. The deep breathing as we're feeling that emotional pain is key for it to digest and dissolve. And often there is a fear that this is just going to consume them and go on forever. And at least half the time, I think even more than that, they feel better in like 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are things that will take time because a lot is built up, or there's a lot of emotional charge around the subject or what happened. So it can be that if you really want to get through it, you'll be sitting there breathing for a while. But a lot of it, people are surprised, like, oh my gosh, I feel better already. Or sometimes I'll
Yeah.
ask them, like, how long do you think that was? And they'd be like, I don't know, 5 minutes. I was like, that was 2 minutes. So it's really
Right.
awesome.
Not a lifetime, but that's how good our parts are at protecting us.
Mm-hmm.
They are very loudly telling you this will hurt too bad forever for the rest of your life. And it really makes me like visualize victim consciousness, like really seeing how I perpetuated those cycles within myself for so long just by refusing to get out of my brain about something, like allowing all of those subconscious parts of me to be in full control of me. And also, when you were talking, I felt like a moment of pride for myself that I had created enough safety within myself for my initial reaction to be so short, and then for self to come in and be like, okay, you had your moment, you good, okay, so you understand what that was, okay, we don't need to talk about it, all right, great. That happens a lot, like a lot. And I'm proud of that. Like I think I'm doing great in that area because I do know like well for first of all, when you work so fucking intensely on self-love and self-forgiveness and self-actualization, all of those things, um you can't help but to see the world in that way where you're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to like harp on the fact that I got upset about it because that didn't do any of us any good. I'm also not going to harp on the fact that you were a bitch. Either this is a relationship where that's going to need some addressing later or not. Like I just don't I really determine where my energy is best fit. And sometimes, especially during PMS, you touched the wrong button and I'm going to go ahead and tell you exactly what I think about it. And I'm going to forgive myself for that too because that's been a real big key for me is the understanding that we were programmed to believe that accountability meant deep admonishment, like that you have to hate yourself for everything you do wrong or else you aren't responsible or accountable. And it took a while to see the different ways that I held myself to that cross because I it's sneaky. It's all part of perfectionism, I think. But it wasn't till one day when I was like, if I did that, they would this. So I am going to give that back to them. And I was thinking, okay, that's not true, first of all. Like, like that they wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do this, whatever. But the important piece to me was understanding where the thinking was coming from, that I held myself to impossible standards because I believed other people to be holding me to those impossible standards. But I can, if I'm going to hold myself to those impossible standards, that's the reason I'm holding everyone else to impossible standards. So really breaking down expectations for me was so key, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm only expecting this because I expect that from myself, and it's not fair in either case. Nobody's here to be perfect. And I even, like, in talking one time with somebody about something my kid had done and my response to what they had done, um they're like, well, then, like, how does the behavior change if you're not gonna, punish to this, like, extreme degree, And I'm like, well, do you believe that shame changes behavior positively long term? Like, and I think that that's a lot of what, like, we as parents are taught to do, is like the whole "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed." That is a very intentional statement to trigger shame. And I'm not going to lie, I did that with my oldest when he was little, because I thought, I mean, I really was like, well, work for me. But, shame's the way to get. You just make them feel like a giant piece of shit, and that they're never going to get anything right. And you got them exactly where you want them. And I do think that's what we're doing.
This is a big fear of arts, is that without negative reinforcement, there won't be motivation. So we won't, do what we want or take care of ourselves or protect ourselves or whatever the case might be. And so, recognizing that and, soothing that fear through feeling it and breathing, and or, talking to the part and reassuring them that, hey, we're on the same page, we want the same thing. Let's trust self. Self will be able to take care of things, the most helpful way. um and you were talking about the there was something else I was going to comment on. You're talking about so with the self-love that you were talking about as well, that is also, you were saying you're proud of yourself because you've created this dynamic through your self-love practice, etc. That is also easier in my experience, and with clients through this work, because it's kind of hard to say, I love myself when I'm abusing alcohol or whatever the case is. But to instead maybe say, like, I can recognize I have this firefighter part that is so terrified and pushes me to alcohol when it's afraid of pain coming up, when pain is coming up. And I can just choose to love that part in their pain, in their fear. And from there, transformation happens. And then even with the expectations piece, something, it's not per se IFS related, but something that's been really huge for me is actually learning to let go of expectations, period. And that was
Yeah.
like, gosh, like, are you kidding
That's
me?
a wild concept, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And it's,
that's what I'm
you know,
trying to do too. And damn it, it's hard.
it's not a perfect process. And I remember when I was first introduced to it, I was like, "Are you joking? Like, how am I ever gonna, get what I want out of life if I don't expect
Exactly.
things?"
Yes.
But
And
again,
did you
recognizing that
utilize this in
that's,
your relationship? Like, I know you've
oh
been
yeah,
married for a little bit. So yeah, like, that's been the key in all of my interpersonal relationships, but particularly my marriage, because if I didn't utilize this, I swear to God we would be divorced, because we're actually very alike, but on the outside, like, our inside is so similar, but the outside, the way we fucking work in this world is so different. And I have to check myself a lot, because his experience is just as important, just as valued as mine is. And so how can we have our two experiences at the same time without causing each other pain? For me, it really is, I react and then I understand. And it's just a process where it's all day, every fucking day. But even like the whole idea of you're not hanging out with me, because I like to be in my bedroom. Um, I don't know why, I just do. But like he hangs out in the living room or the office. Well, he's like, I'm not gonna, we don't have anywhere to sit in the bedroom other than the bed. And he's like, I'm not fucking hanging out in the bed. It's not like good for you and it hurts my back. And you know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, but you're not even like asking me to come hang out. And I'm like asking myself, when's the last fucking time you actually directly said, want to do something? You know, like I do always wait. I know I'm not trying to set him up for failure. I know there's a part of me that still very much fears rejection. And I don't initiate a lot of different things because I don't want to be rejected. And that's not his fault. Like I have to ask for the things I want. I can't expect shit. And the expectation also can't be just because you want it or feel that you need it that he can meet those needs. And that's been when I started working on expectations and started understanding like truly you have to be able to meet every single one of your needs to the majority of the extent. You have to be able to do that for yourself. There's no relationship that can meet a single one of your fucking needs other than companionship.
Yeah. It's actually the beauty of learning to listen and be present with our emotions. Because that's how we know. That's how we know a need's not being met. And from that
Mm-hmm.
place of awareness and curiosity, we can explore it. We can recognize, what it is we're wanting. We can also recognize, you know, what's in the way of that. Okay, it's this part that's afraid of being rejected. How can I help this part? Well, we have tools and steps, we haven't gotten super into details, but and then from there, you can be in self and do what you actually want. So this fear of, we won't be motivated or we will be walked all over if we're not in fear or shame is just not the truth. But you're right, what we said earlier, the parts can be very, very convincing, but it's like a child.
Okay.
Like they think they know everything and they will exaggerate.
Yes. I'm glad you put it that way, because yes. Yeah, and they believe their pain in that moment, like because they're disappointed about something, to be very real, and in their world it is, and I will honor that, but also no. And I think to your point about motivation, I think you are more empowered to make the healthy decisions when you're not fucking shaming yourself, because or receiving shame from someone else, like allowing that shame to be placed on you. I can repel that shit quick because um I do love myself. I'm very aware of who myself really is. I love the framing of the C's and the P's because there was a time I would have needed to check in on a list like that to be like, oh, okay, that's not that. So that's not me. And to understand that, like, you got this whole little inner world happening that, you got to sort out. And if most of what we think and believe is rooted deep and very little of this consciousness is happening, of course there's all these things that you're unaware of and you just have to figure it out. And I think the awareness is the key. And that's the part that keeps me very grounded is like, oh, what was that? Because it's gonna happen. Those things are gonna happen. And I think that's what kind of fucking drives me crazy with some of like spiritual bypassing is where like you have to get to a place where you understand the humanity in you, why you do the things that you do. You can't just go expand your consciousness and think about things on this higher level without acknowledging the lower levels. And I think IFS is saying the same thing. Even if it's not necessarily mentioning spirituality or anything like that, I think it's saying to do this, you must also do this. And uh, that's also why, like, it drives me crazy to see some of the programs out there that are like the no BS method, and it's like, well, you're still teaching people to dismiss their feelings. So let's not jump on that bandwagon because that's what we've all been doing our whole lives. And there are very creative ways out there to tell yourself that you're overreacting or that everybody, other people have it so much worse than you. Like when I did that talk in Seattle, I was very honest about the fact that I have trouble taking up space in the kinship foster area because yes, I was in foster care, but it was kinship, and I saw people in non-kinship placements with much worse experiences than me, and it made me feel like I didn't have a right to own the fact that I was in foster care. It's still hard. Like talking about it right now still makes me feel stupid and like a crybaby, like because that's the programming you receive in childhood because nobody's parents knew about this shit. So I don't care how great your parents were, they all did it. And in fact, I mean, it's scary and alarming to me. I still see this stuff happening like, well, everybody goes through something and you just have to da da da. And I'm like, listen, are you hearing me say that I'm laying in bed crying about my problems all day, every day because I'm acknowledging parts of me that need attention? That is wild to me.
Well, I think, for one, as established, people are afraid of emotional pain. It makes people get uncomfortable even seeing others allow themselves to experience emotion. But I know in my experience, even like I was very resistant to pain. I wanted to have that compassion. I always had compassion, but there was this like overwhelming discomfort making me want to fix, to help, to heal myself, my loved ones, you know. But it wasn't only my discomfort, it was a fear of drowning in it or even seeing them drown in it. Because that's
Yes.
what a lot of what I saw in my life was people either avoiding emotion or just sinking into depression or anger and being overridden by it. And that's
Oh,
where, these coping tools, not, I do distinguish them from coping. I see coping often as like helping you kind of contain and manage and move forward, which, yeah, we want that. But again, we need to really get in there to heal it and digest it. And what I've learned is that, we don't have to express emotion to process it. We don't have to, be overrun by it to process it. We don't have to get really angry or have to, be depressed for days. We can acknowledge the physical sensations of the emotion, zoom in our awareness on those sensations, and just really surrender, open up, and allow the experience of feeling them. We can even send love to the part of us that's bringing this up because we know from self in the long run this is going to really help us and heal us. And we can just have love for ourselves as we breathe and feel it. And it doesn't have to turn into this days long depression or this big angry outburst or an argument, even, or any of that. So I think that's an important distinction because people really tend to see it as one way or the other. Either you're overtaken by
yes.
emotions or you off and you move on.
I didn't even put that together, but you're exactly right. People believe that that icky feeling, that that's what depression is, and that you will sink into, you'll never be able to get out of it if you allow yourself to feel it. Like I remember like hearing people say, I just got to keep myself busy because the second I stop to really think about this, I don't know if I'm ever going to get back up again. And I think that is a very real fear when we're in a crisis, especially if you've had a loss. Um, I think the fear is very
And
real that you'll never be okay again if you allow yourself to stop and feel it.
and I will say there, without awareness, it can be
Sure,
dangerous. Because we
sure.
do, some of us do have like suicidal parts or just extreme parts that want to do all kinds of crazy things to avoid those feelings. But it's different if we, because, thinking about it, that's another thing. We think thinking and feeling are the same. You already touched on that. But thinking about it is letting the part in the driver's seat. And so,
Hmm.
yes, you're experiencing the pain, but you're it's like you're feeling it, but you're very much in the head as well, and that's keeping the fire burning. So sometimes use this analogy of like our emotions are these logs, and we're carrying around all these logs, weighing us down, making things difficult. What we want to do is let them burn, just burn them to ash. And if we express our emotion, we're creating all like a fire around everything, and we don't want that. We don't want it to go on and on. If we're thinking, we're just adding more fuel to the fire and making it go on and on and on. It's like we're adding, just finding other things to add to it. But if we
Yeah.
just feel in the body and we breathe and we sit with it and we don't run a narrative, we don't start worrying about the future or going over the past again and again or all these different things from the past. If the brain goes there, it goes there. But just return back to what am I feeling, breathing, processing. You need to cry, cry, but keep breathing. We don't want to just lose ourselves to the crying. We want to allow it. We want to process it. But that breathing, that deep cyclical breathing is what leads to digestion. And it doesn't have to be those other extremes as we were discussing.
Well, because I think the extremes are a manufactured emotion created by the thoughts that are either it's never going to be better, so future forecasting in a catastrophic way, and usually all the past stuff, especially if you're talking about like feeling stuck in a marriage. That's what would happen to me every time something would come up. I would latch on and then think about every way he's ever failed me and then all the ways he's going to continue to fail me. And that was a very like lost, stuck feeling, which is not the truth. So I was creating these feelings within my body that were manufactured by my thoughts versus now when I'm like, okay, you were feeling rejected. You were feeling this, and sitting with what was coming up in this present and then releasing it to move forward. But yeah, it does take a lot of work to learn how to stay very present in your world. But that is the key versus overthinking and thinking about past and future when those are irrelevant in this moment. But again, I think that we think that's feeling. And like I remember one time when I worked in hospice, me and a girl were driving to a client's house and she was talking about a marriage issue she was having, and she was telling me all of the I feels that she gave him, and none of it was actually feelings. It was like, I feel like you blah 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 blah, and I used to be guilty of it too. I couldn't like, well, I don't know what the actual feeling is. So, it's taken me a long time to be able to be like, oh, betrayal came up. Oh, rejection came up. Oh, but I used to be like, I feel like da 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 da. And I was one of those like, just word vomit for hours. And my poor husband checked out within 1 minute of everything I was saying. So now I'm getting pissed too. Like, you're fucking ignoring me. All of those things. None of it was feelings. It was just my brain continuing the loop of actually what it was saying is like, you're not good enough. Nobody loves you. Like he's doing these things because you're a piece of shit. Yeah. And I wasn't aware of that though. I didn't have a single clue. I did like at the pinnacle of my mental health crisis, I was starting to be able to identify some language that was happening up there, but not like it just enough to feel crazy because it was different voices, but not like the underlying narratives behind them. Anyway, I know you have to go. I appreciate you so much. I've loved talking about this. I'm gonna do some more work on this because I really I just like systems so much. I just think they're so much easier to work with when you have a tangible vocabulary for things. And so I'm just trying to expand my vocabulary and the vocabulary of others, even just for them to go look into this themselves. If they have a therapist, have their therapist utilize this with them. I know a few people who listen are in therapy, so I really want to be bringing in different modalities for helping people find peace.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, and I've loved getting to see you and talk to you, and I love talking about this topic as well. And there are some really great like self workbooks out there, and a really good book that I listened to on audiobook by the author is No Bad Parts. And that's one that I would really recommend if you're interested. Yeah, I loved seeing you chatting about this. It's really fun.
We're gonna have to figure out how to like meet in person.
Yes, we will. It'll happen.
Okay. Well, I hope you have a great day.
You too, girl. See ya.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks for coming to Emotionally Unavailable. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, and share.